Living in a world which accommodates diverse people is no piece of cake. Each day we hear of untoward incidents, we know about quaint subjects which might trigger a conflict anytime, and yet we keep the strength to face this world every day. Today, we welcome you to Learning Forward Podcast, Season 10, Episode 11, where passion meets education. And I, Anvesha, will be your host for the event. Today, we have an extraordinary guest here with us. We invite the author of A Beautiful Decay, Mr. Karan Madhok. Would you like to speak a few words, sir?
Hello, Anvesha. Thank you so much for having me on this podcast. I'm really excited to share the stories about my book and to talk to you about literature and talk to you about my journey and my process of writing today.
Thank you, sir. It is lovely to be here alongside you on this day. And A Beautiful Decay is a fantastic novel with an exciting title. What is the significance behind this great name, sir?
I've been asked about the title quite a bit. The way I looked at it is, I consider much of life to be, and I don't mean this in a negative way. It's just a matter of fact. Much of life for all of us is a decay. There is an entropy that leads to an end. We are all going to unfortunately die. Everything that lives dies at some point. But at the same time, even though I said it, that doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be a negative thing. Even though the end of the journey might be a sad end, the journey itself can be beautiful. So that's the way I approach this title. Looking at the idea of a decay, of an end, of entropy, but through an aesthetically beautiful glance, through an eye of something that appreciates the very fact that we are alive. As this novel, as you might, for those who have read this novel, they'll know that it centers around a pretty tragic incident. Now, of course, tragedy is at the heart of all death. But that said, Vishnu, who is the main character in this novel, doesn't always wallow in that tragedy. He celebrates the beauty in his life. He celebrates everything that's in his life uh, until that very moment of his death.
Yes, sir, I completely agree. And thank you so much for that answer. And I believe like we all should be like Vishnu. We should be happy. And yes, that's it. And so, like this book, it's a vivid look at the barbarity beneath the surface in countries like India and America. So, sir, what inspired you to pen this down?
So when I was first starting on this particular project, there had been a very serious hate crime in the United States. I was in Washington D.C. I was working on a larger manuscript of something else. But in Kansas, in the United States, there was a very barbaric hate crime, which really moved me. There was an Indian young professional who was killed, and it really made me think about how how even the safe spaces that we think we might have, for example, the young man in Kansas who was killed, he was in a bar with his close friends, and his killing was a random act of racial hate. It really made me think that somebody like me might not be safe anywhere, even in the places where I feel are safe. But as I was thinking about that, I also started thinking that while I may feel like a targeted minority in the United States, when I'm back in India, I am the majority. I'm of the majority community, and I'm of the community that turns around and targets minorities in my own country. So that was a juxtaposition that really got me thinking, and that was the complexity that I wanted to speak about through this novel. The idea that one person could be an oppressed minority in one place and the oppressor majority in a different place.
Oh, that was great, sir. We love to know that. And I personally loved reading the book. And the book, it traces the sequence of events that led to the death of Vishnu, who is the protagonist in the novel. He's a 21-year-old Indian student in Washington, D.C. So, if you could please elaborate a bit on your book to give more readers an idea about what it holds.
Yeah, so as I've already given some hints, the novel begins with Vishnu's death, and this is not a spoiler. This is the opening. So on the very first page, Vishnu has been murdered, but now we are left with Vishnu's consciousness, his posthumous consciousness, and he has gained a sort of omniscience where he can be anywhere he wants to be, in anybody's mind, in any place. I've often joked that this book was a precursor to the idea that was eventually became the movie Everything All at Once that just won the Oscar. Uh, it was a similar idea which I wrote about a few years ago, where Vishnu, after his death, is now actually everywhere all at once in everybody's mind. He's in the past, he's in the future. He is seeing how his father came up and became a successful person. He's seeing the struggles of his mother living with his father. He's seeing the story of his brother, his closest friends, and he's sort of building this large jigsaw puzzle of people around him and of circumstances around him that led him to the very point of his demise. And he's understanding his life and his times through this.
Thank you, sir. And I'm sure that the other readers who will read this book, they will also love it as well. But apart from the novel, if we talk about writing, which is a shared passion among many people worldwide, so, sir, like, were you determined to pursue a career in writing, or was it just something that happened over time?
Well, pursuing a career in writing is always a tricky thing to say because unfortunately, because of the economics of this job, a career is not always possible through just being a writer. I think almost unless you're one of the highest selling best selling authors in the world, it's almost impossible to make a career out of writing. I feel almost all writers, they have a secondary side job, something that helps them basically, maintain their life, maintain their lifestyle, so to say. So for me, I always love writing. I've always written short stories, comic books, um, personal essays, writer larger fiction pieces. So to me, I always thought of myself as being feeling most comfortable communicating with the world and looking at the world through a lens of writing. This is how I've had a pretty long career as a journalist. I've worked as a correspondent. I've worked as a sports journalist because I always saw myself as someone who saw the world and wanted to then observe and communicate it through my words. So writing a book almost seemed like a natural extension of that kind of lifestyle that I've always wanted to pursue and my obsessions of with writing.
Well, thank you, sir. And I believe, like you, many other people, they find their solace in writing. And so I loved conversing with you today, and thank you so much for your time. With that, we come to the end of our podcast. Comment below and let us know if you liked our podcast. If you want to be a part of similar podcasts, join us. We hope to meet you again soon. That's all for us today.